It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
This is the Cosmic Voice. Cosmic Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business with your hosts, Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmic Voice. This is Season 4, Episode 15. I am here with my co-host, Chris Natalini.
It's summertime! It's summertime! Hello, everybody.
And I am Mick Michaels. Welcome back, everyone, to another Cosmic Voice episode. Chris, how are you, sir? How are you?
I'm doing good. It's summer, although I'm fighting a summer cold as we speak.
Well, you're getting it out of the way early, right? Get it over early.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Again, on the show, getting over the flu. So if I sound a little raspy, that is why. But I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm excited. It is warm. It's starting to get really, really hot. The day of recording this, we'll probably be into some decent heat by the time everyone hears it. But as of right now, the present of today, it is coming off a nice couple hot days, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm loving it too. Actually, yesterday was so warm, it reminded me of being out in Arizona. That's how much I love it. It's like, let's get it up there. So, yeah, I'm getting excited. Hopefully, we're going to be done with the rain. I know there's some hurricanes happening here and there down in the Gulf and stuff, but hopefully
it's that time, right?
Yeah, it's that time. Hopefully, though, the sun will prevail and we'll have a fantastic, very dry, heat-exhausted summer, and I'm all ready for it. I am ready for it.
Whatever kills my grass, I'm all about it.
I hear you. That's what a lot of people say. The browner, the better.
That's right. No problem mowing dirt.
Mowing dirt. I hear you. They put those heat warnings out. Everybody says, all right, I'm not doing anything. We're shutting down. Unlike the 70s and early 80s, they just said, check on an elderly neighbor. They didn't shut anything down, though.
That's right.
And then those people showed up on the 6 o'clock news. You know what I mean? You know how it goes. You know how it goes.
I do know how it goes. But we are in the warm weather, bro. This is what we've been waiting for.
Oh, yeah. You got any big plans for the summer? You got anything happen? You don't have to tell us where you're going, so you don't have people outside your door. You have any big plans?
I do, man. I have a ton of plans, man. I do. So many shows we're going to. Going to do a little traveling. Normal stuff. Maybe, squeeze in a few dinners with the Michaels.
There you go.
The Michaels couple.
That's right, the Michaels.
Yeah, man. Just normal summer stuff. But, like I said, we have a ton of shows coming up, which I'm really excited about. A couple that I'm excited for. A couple that my wife's dragging me to. But either way, it'll be cool. I'm not worried about it. She's dragging me to Skynyrd, and I am not. She's a big Southern classic rock kind of gal, and I'm like, I never got into it. Not that it's bad. I just never got it.
Yeah, I never totally got it either, but it is definitely a movement. I mean, there is those Skynyrd fan. I mean, it's just,
Ooh. I mean, I don't even know if they're, again, this is an argument we could have. Is there even one original member? I don't know.
I couldn't even tell you.
And I know my wife, my wife is one of those people. She don't really care. She just wants to hear those songs. You know what I mean? Like she's that kind of fan. And it's coming for her birthday, so she was like, "Oh, can we go see Skynyrd?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you want to go? Get tickets, we'll go." And so we're going to see Skynyrd. I'm like, "Oh, this ought to be awesome."
Well, summertime concerts are always kind of fun, especially if they're
always
outdoor.
The best, right?
There's always something, because
sometimes the weather is awesome.
Yes, as long as the weather is really good, they sometimes have some outside stuff happening for people. It's a good time. It's going to be a good time for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, man? You got any plans?
For us, Philly folk, going to hit the shore at some point, maybe a couple times. I got some plans I want to do around my house this year that I gotta be present for. So I've been putting them off for a while. But I'm just looking forward that at the end of the day or at some point of the day, I could just sit out on my back deck and vegetate for a couple hours in the sun, and that's it.
There you go.
To me,
that's it, man.
The less I do, the better. The
Yeah,
less
I agree.
Yeah, and I could just contemplate, new episodes that we have to do for the Cosmick Voice, when we do season 5, if we get that
That's
far.
right.
If we survive the summer.
Yeah, well, and here too, man, like not for nothing, all joking aside, you are a busy guy. I mean, you do have a lot of plates in the air that you're juggling, so.
Well, I like this. I do like to stay
outside of
busy.
the podcast and the band, like you have a lot of stuff, and then you're obviously you're a dad and a wife and have a family, so you are juggling a lot of things. If anybody follows you on social media, outside of your private life, they'll know that.
Well, maybe I like to stay busy. I think it's important. Idle mind kind of sends you a little nutty, so it's a good thing. I mean, again, like in this business. Or just in life in general, I guess you just want to keep moving forward. You keep trying new things, new challenges, hopefully create new accomplishments, and maybe, we try to share that experience with somebody down the line, kind of like what we do with this podcast. See how I turn that around to somebody else? With that, tonight's episode is, Do I Need a Producer? Now, there's a lot that can go to that, a lot of it. I mean, there's stuff on either side, depending on who you're talking to. But from an indie, in the trench type of artist point of view, do you really need a producer? I don't know. What do you think, Chris? Do you need a producer?
Well, Mick, I was thinking about this, as people know, you and I sometimes decide, ahead of time what we're going to talk about. So it usually gives us some time to kind of get our thoughts together. As I told you earlier before we hit record, that I was thinking about this one a lot today. If you would have asked 22-year-old Chris Natalini, I probably would have said no. Asking 52-year-old Chris Natalini, I probably would say yeah. Like, I think, now, mind you, don't get me wrong, is need, quote unquote, air quotes, is need the right word? I don't know. Because do you really need a producer? I guess it depends on where you are in your career. If you're a young guy, then maybe you do. If you're an old guy like Mick and I, no, you don't always have to. But I think it's important to have an outside opinion, because sometimes, and you and I know we spoke about this on another show at some point, sometimes you need an outside force because you're so in your own stuff, right? Not necessarily in your own head. You wrote it, you crafted it from scratch, or the band you're in is crafted from scratch. Like, this is your baby, right? Like, you've taken days, months, sometimes years if you're in my band, because it just takes years to get something together. It's yours, right? And it's kind of hard to have someone come from the outside go, well, I don't know if this matches, or maybe we should try this, or let's do this. I am a firm believer in allowing that opportunity, because at the end of the day, you are a paying customer, so you can say no. But I think that a good producer will ask you first. Oh, I guess we talked about it when we talked about getting ready to record, probably one of our earlier episodes. A good producer maybe will ask you, hey, do you mind if I give you advice, or, if I hear things, or maybe they'll just do it and play it out and see how you take it, right? It's always easier to apologize later. I'm a big advocate for an outside opinion to go, I hear this, or maybe we should try this. This may not sound right. These notes don't go together right. I think I've even said on the show, there was many years ago that my band was in the studio. Seeds, my band, we're an ilk where we don't mind other people's opinions. And even been times where we've had parts rewritten for us because the producer just thought, hey, let's try this. And it just sounded better. And that's kind of what I was getting to. Like, we had spent years playing the song the same exact way. And we get in the studio and the producer goes, did you guys ever think of doing it this way? And then he played it for us and we're like, no, but that's amazing. And it made the song that much better. And if it wasn't for his, first of all, if it wasn't for his confidence of being able to come up with that, we may have missed out on a really great opportunity. So for me, I never mind someone else who comes in and goes, hey, Chris, why don't we try this line this way? Or let's do a line this way. Or let's try this instead of this. That doesn't bother me. Do you need a producer? I think the word need depends on where you fall in your career. Again, if you're a young guy, yeah, you probably should have a producer to kind of give you some direction, and then you learn as you go.
Okay. I see what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I agree with some of that for sure. And I mean, because let's talk about what you don't agree with. Well, it's not that I'm disagreeing with you per se at all. I mean, because everybody has their own experience. I'm kind of split down the middle, but at the same time, I think if I stepped out of myself as a third party, I think I know where I'd be leaning towards anyway. But, well, why do people go for a producer, right? There's a lot of different reasons. And like you said, like certain genres seem to really weigh heavily on certain producers, right?
Yeah.
And it depends and it depends on the role of the producer. What are they really providing? A lot of times you'll get an engineer who's also a producer, and they're kind of like doing a dual role. And they may be producing in terms of more audio quality, engineering standards, especially if you're running a budget and you only have the budget for one. So you kind of get a 2-for-1, so to speak, engineer-producer type of guy.
And that's kind of what we've always had. One guy, do both.
And then in the much higher echelon, you'll have a dedicated engineer, and then you'll have a dedicated producer, right? Because the the money is there, the resource is there to finance that type of thing. So that being said, Paul Stanley he actually said in his autobiography, there's a huge difference between an engineer and a producer. And they learned that the hard way over the years, too.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes engineers can give you... Sometimes engineers are as educated, and sometimes they're not. It all depends, right? Some of that is a personal preference. It depends on a lot of things, their background. I was once told at a seminar-type class or something, there was a point in time where everyone was calling themselves a producer. You know, you quickly pick up that title, I'm a producer. And... they said, you're not a producer if you can't read music. The light went off in my head, and I go, wow, I guess I'm screwed because I don't read music. But I look at being a producer slightly differently. So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit before I get into kind of where I fall to this. I think a producer is more than someone who just can read music or even just plays an instrument, though I think that does help. However, we have seen, and you can read about them, there are plenty of very popular producers who don't play music themselves.
Right.
They don't play an instrument, but they have this ear, right? And sometimes it's a matter of understanding tones or understanding what resonates with people emotionally, sonically, that kind of thing. And as you had stated, they're kind of like that third party. Right? To give you some perspective. And I think that's the one goal of a producer, is to give that perspective. It's a sounding board. And if you've read some artist bios, the producer was always kind of like the deciding vote when the band kind of was in splits of what should we do, or we didn't know, So there's that role. At the same time, there's the role of the producer to make sure everybody's on a schedule, things are getting done, time frames are met, budget's being met, you're not going overboard too much or whatever the case may be. Like with the Beatles, hey, we need an anvil for this one part so I can hit it 3 or 4 times in a song, get a good... So, you spend all day, you send out one of your associate producers to go find some anvil somewhere in Scotland. So, it's those type of things, too. Nowadays, I think there's a role of a producer where what does it bring to your project in terms of name value, of brand bang, right? A little bang for the buck. And how is this going to play out in the PR media environment? So there's some of that too, where there's guys that are just lending their names to projects, getting paid, getting this producer title, so to speak, kind of like what happens a lot of times in movies or TV shows when the major star also then becomes like an executive producer after the 3rd season. It's worked into their contract. Maybe they're giving a little bit of input here or there, but I don't think that they're doing the same. Not everybody, but I think there are people who really do put the time in, and there's other people who don't. They've created a production company, and then they have people under them to take care of it, but of course their name is the bigger. And I think you have that too with music people. I think it's probably very popular in more of pop when you're lending your name, so to speak. Not to say it doesn't happen elsewhere, but I think because there's so much music coming out. A lot of times, like in the rock and metal, guys will take a while on an album. It's not like an album's done in 2 weeks and out the door, though things are getting quicker these days. You know what I mean? We're not sitting on albums, unless it's a real big album.
It's Ross the Boss.
Take it down. This is Stephen Pearson from Rat, the Rat Bastard. You're listening to the Cosmick Voice.
So, the question is, why do people decide to go for a producer? Well, all of that and plus some. Some artists or bands per se, they can play, and there may be bits and pieces that they have of stuff that's like, hey, there's something there, but they need somebody to put it together. Not every band is a great songwriting team. I've seen that up close and personal myself. Not to say that, hey, this isn't this, or that guys are no good here, but listen, that's why you have studio musicians sometimes. That's why you have the creative kind. That's why you have bands that play live, but, haven't recorded an album in years. And then you have the other stuff, bands that don't play live and seem to keep writing material. So it's all that kind of stuff. I think you have to weigh it out as, what are you really looking for in terms of a producer? One of my qualms with producers is that sometimes what happens is they mold a band so much. In essence, what they're doing is creating their own band to their own vision. And when that band isn't with that producer anymore, there's usually a drop in quality. Songwriting quality or sound quality. Maybe they're not churning out the same amount of hits.
With that, you could make that argument that Bob Rock kind of did that for Metallica, right? Like, Metallica was this hardcore thrash band, got with Bob Rock. Their songs became shorter, more commercially oriented. He kind of gave James a different way to approach his vocals. Mm-hmm. And he changed them. I mean, he changed it forever. He changed metal forever, right? I mean, a lot of it was because of Bob Rock. And then after Bob Rock, Metallica changed. Their songs got longer. They sound more like they did back in the old days.
Sure.
Give or take. That's an argument to be had.
Yeah.
But, so going with what you're saying, I mean, that makes perfect sense.
Well, another example is look at what Mutt Lange did for Def Leppard. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I mean, he took that, listen to their first album, and it's all over the place. It's a lot of their different influences. This is just my opinion. And it's not cohesive. And there's a couple stellar songs on there, but some of the other ones hit or miss, right? And then they kind of found their own little vibe on the next one. And then, then it started to kind of permeate from there once they got this direction. But, once they're not there, I mean, again, listen, a band does change forever at that point. Some guys do run with it, and some kind of like, well, they're lost in the shuffle again. They're back to square one. What do I do? Or they say, I'm going to try a different producer. That producer doesn't necessarily have the same motive, or, maybe because they want to change their sound. They don't want to, just like, nobody wants to be defined by just one album.
Right.
But unfortunately,
that's just
how it is for all of us. I would love to be defined by one album and continue to get residuals from that album.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
I do.
So... But that's always been, I don't know if it's used the word fear, but it's always been a thing of mine. It's like, well, this producer does this, but it's almost impossible to maintain. It changes.
Yeah.
Like night and day from what, like, say, Bob Ezrin did in Destroyer for Kiss, and then what Eddie Kramer did for Kiss with Rock and Roll Over. I mean, literally, there's a night and day in sound, in everything.
Yeah.
And again, we know the stories of what Bob Ezrin did during Destroyer to get Kiss to this level of whatever it was he was trying to get them to.
Right.
There's not as many stories as like that with Eddie Kramer. Was what we know of Kiss and the evolution, were those first three albums more of the band, even though there were some producers on there. Even though them albums originally didn't do as well, and they weren't happy with the sound and all that kind of stuff. But was that more of the band? And then as the band punched up, they were able to get producers to... But then you could see that with their progression, things started to change as well.
Yeah.
That's always a concern of mine. That's like, especially if... And again, I'm not going to poo-poo like hits and stuff, because if an artist needs a bump... and they've been kind of staggering for a couple albums, but they're still kind of maintaining a level, but they need that extra something, well, then they bring in a producer that's going to give them that extra edge.
Yeah.
But my concern was, is that sustainable after a while? Firm believer is like, nobody knows sometimes what you need better than yourself, if you're honest with yourself. And we talked about this before. Unfortunately, many of us aren't honest with ourselves, especially as artists. We allow our egos to get in the way that, like sometimes our worst enemy is ourselves.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Right? Because we don't want to admit defeat, or we don't want to admit that this isn't good enough, or, it's time to scrap it, or, maybe we try, And I think that's where that role of that producer comes in. Recently, I've talked to a few producers of name with the intent of working together. But it was more of a research project for me at this stage than saying, yeah, I'm on board 100%. Because I'm still kind of trying to balance the whole idea. Like, yeah, no. I have been fortunate enough over the last couple albums to be the producer for the band in that regard. And I'm honored to have that position, and I feel very responsible for it. So it's not like something I took and said, well, yeah, okay, well, I'm in the band anyway, so it's not like, whatever. Right. But there was a different type of role besides my writing and playing on it. Things had changed even after we recorded it, and I said, now we have to do this a whole new way. And I'm a firm believer in that nobody knows what you need better sometimes than yourself if you're honest with it. If you're honest with yourself and you're doing your best to write good music, I don't think you may need a producer. Can you have a soundboard? Well, yeah, that's possible. Again, I'm going to bring it back to Bon Jovi had the Pizza Parlor Jury for Slippery When Wet. They just took some fans off the streets and let them listen to it, and the fans kind of picked the songs or gave them input, and then they went back in and made some changes as the reaction was noted down. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm confusing everything here more so than anything, but like I said, recently I just talked to some producers for my band, thinking that, maybe it's a time that, because we've had some success in recent years. And after talking to some people, I'm like, I'm still not positive. I don't, I don't want someone coming in necessarily and changing everything to make it just fit their mold.
Right. I agree.
Rather than,
I agree.
like, where's the band going at this time? What do they need, right? And usually if you're diligent in your writing should be reflecting that.
Yeah.
Right? As the band grows, as musicians, as performers, as a unit. And you'll often see this progression within the albums. Some bands do get lost. Some find their way again. Some go completely someplace else. But so I'm not exactly sure. The other thing is nowadays, like, the cost of it could be ridiculous. I know of several bands, I'm not naming names and I'm not going to name producers, but they've used guys either from well-known bands or people that had some track record, some traction with what they produced. They paid some astronomical amount, and nothing really came about from the album in terms of, like,
right.
Again, what does a producer bring using that idea of what they do in pop? It's like that name recognition, that name brand, that push. Well, if you're going to pay that kind of money and you're going to work with somebody of that caliber, well, it should add some extra flavor to what you're doing. That's my personal opinion. However, if it doesn't, and the music isn't really that much better, maybe you have a stellar sonic recording. It sounds great in terms of, the meters, the levels, the audio. But if the music isn't really that much different, then what did you pay for?
Right. Yeah.
So, you run that risk as well. For indie, in the trench bands, well, you got to watch your P's and Q's, in my opinion, right? What is it that you really want to get out of it? And if you're not getting that out of it relatively quickly, you need to cut ties and move on, because that could be the difference of, like, if you're I'm just going to throw some numbers out, okay? If your album costs you $100,000 to make, which if you're paying that money nowadays, you should get into another line of work. But and $75,000 of it went to the producer, something's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay? And then nothing's coming from it. Again, like in the old days, I guess, you'll have some of them say that a producer, like a big-time producer, they would get $1 an album. So if that album sold $6 million, that producer got $6 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, I guess you could see why people were jumping up to be producers, and they wanted to move up the ladder very quickly.
You are listening to The Cosmic Voice with your hosts, Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels.
But does a band need it? I don't know. I think that most bands probably don't. And again, if they're honest with themselves and they're being true to their writing style, and it's a maturation of that writing style, then I don't think that you necessarily do. Not to say that you don't need maybe a third party or an outside party just to give a little bit of input. You know, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? That not necessarily that they're giving you, producer type input, but at the end of the day, the people that are listening aren't producers. A lot of them even aren't musicians. They don't have an interest in playing instruments or writing music. They just want to enjoy it.
Yep.
And we talked about this before. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a complicated song or an overcomplicated song for people to enjoy. It can be simple. And that's why, C, D, and G, thousands of songs have been written with those three chords because they resonate well with us. So if I was coming off some albums that I won a Grammy and a couple platinums and whatever, it makes sense in the higher echelons that you want to keep that level going to work with different producers. Listen, like you said, some you're going to hit with and some maybe didn't work out as well.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden it's like night or day, and like you were saying with Metallica, that all of a sudden they go back to what they know, and I'm not saying one way or the other, but is that demonstrating that they didn't learn anything in that process? That they went back to what they were doing before? Now, again, that could have been by choice. It's like, hey, we want to go back to what we were doing. That's what brought us to where we are. But then at the same time, the argument could be, well, you haven't had a real big hit since then. Or you haven't had this since then.
Yeah.
And you're still living off of this. Because if a band is still somewhat up on the higher echelon, well, I guess they're still doing okay.
Yeah.
There's still things coming in to, whatever. But for the indie trench band, I don't think a producer's always needed. A lot of times, like you said, the engineer plays a dual role. And if that engineer is at all interested in what they're doing as well, they're going to want to maintain some standard, some level of sound quality. And it should be in their right to make some suggestions. Because nowadays a lot of places are privately owned, studios. You're paying for it, but they should be giving you some suggestions anyway because they're the expert in that field.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think also, too, I think that in the history of hard rock and heavy metal, there's been so many producers that have really kind of changed artists' careers. Like once, Johnny Cash got with Rick Rubin, who owned Def Jam, and, it took Johnny Cash on a whole different echelon. It gave him a whole new crowd.
Sure.
That was listening to him because of Rick Rubin. Then you got, obviously Ted Templeton with Van Halen. Those records can't touch them.
But again, we're also talking about artists or bands that had already kind of started their way up or were there, and that opportunity was presented to them. I mean, like, I'm not going to be able to work with Rick Rubin. I don't think. I doubt it. Or Mutt Lange or anyone of that nature, unless something all of a sudden, it goes from night and day, and then it's a different story. One, the price tag is way too much, and two, there's no bang for the buck. It's always good to go up. It's in this case, it's never good to kind of move.
Never good to
down.
go down.
Yeah. So it's. I guess the sad thing is that opportunity is not available to the independent artist, in the trench artist. I'm not going to say that's completely true, because I do often see where some new band or group or artist that has a little bit of finances behind them, for whatever reason, could be personal. Someone could be investing some money because they, because there are still people that believe in the development stage. So you'll have sometimes producers that go out, they look for artists, they go, okay, I'm going to invest such and such this time and give of my experience to do this. Again, with indie and independent artists, we don't necessarily have that opportunity at our beck and call. They're not knocking at our door and going, hey, can we work with you? Usually you can't get anyone to look at you sideways unless you go, look, I got $75,000. What are you going to do? Can you do something?
Yeah.
And most people aren't going to pass up on that, right? And again, for $75,000, I don't think you're getting Mutt Lange, and I don't think you're getting Rick Rubin or Bob Rock or Chris Natalini or anything like that. I don't think you're getting any of those guys.
Listen, for $7, you can get me.
Yeah, I'm really a Happy Meal and you know what I mean, and a place to sit down. Then I'll sit in with you. That's where some people get lost or confused, or they get too concerned about, like, oh, we got to have, it's kind of like that old thing, we got to have a manager. You know what I mean? Well,
yeah.
I don't know about that. I think if you got a good studio setup where you're going, it's decent, you're turning out good audio quality. You have a good engineer who knows the basics, has a solid grasp on it, is able to take what you're giving him sonically and make something good out of it. I think that's great. Because, even sometimes in the old days, you had a guy that recorded, you had a guy that mixed it, separate guy, you had a separate guy that mastered it, separate guy that produced it. So, again, but that's with the budgets.
Yeah.
It's with the budgets. Back in the 80s, we worked with a producer guy. You worked with the same producer.
I did.
Yeah. I mean, he was also a highly skilled engineer. After a while, he started having other people work the board while he, oversaw stuff and like that. He worked with Grand Funk Railroad, so I'm not going to name names, but we'll throw that out there so we're not making it completely. So he had some skill sets. The thing is back then, he didn't have a lot of experience in metal.
Right.
So he was definitely, there was a lot of stuff, like while we were in the studio, we'd play these songs and, and he only worked in that capacity with bands that he liked. Like, where he went the extra mile and spent more time. And there was times, I still remember, I haven't, that he'd get on his little piano keyboard thing and he'd play, like, because he could play and he had the ear. And, we were just 5 lugheads with that new block chords and that's about it. And he goes, oh, yeah. And he would do this and he goes, let's take that melody and we'll just do a counter melody here, with the chords and stuff. Or, or he put this in. I remember there was one song we wanted to have keyboards and we didn't play keyboards. So he was able to kind of work out a whole melody with keyboards. So it was, that kind of thing is what our early experience was with a producer.
Right.
But going back to what I was saying, that I've recently spoke to some producers. Listen, they were all great people to talk to. I learned a lot in the conversation. I was pretty much transparent. Didn't come in with a chip on my shoulder, was very, respectful and reverent to them. I asked questions when I could, but I was also firm in my idea that I wasn't necessarily looking for a complete overhaul, and I wasn't saying that what I was doing I didn't like. My goal for this whole research was to, I want to keep pushing forward as an artist, as a songwriter, as a band, right? And is this something that we should look into to make that continue to happen? So that's where I was at. We're talking about this. The more I talked to people, the more I went through it, and compared notes and things like that. I'm like, I'm not exactly sure yet. I'm still not positive. Haven't made any decision, but I'm continuing moving forward on both my album and the EP and writing new songs and recording, because that's what I do. Yep. And I think that other piece is different. You know what I mean? Like, if I wanted to start from scratch or change something, again, this is my personal opinion, then maybe I would be working with the producer right from the beginning, before that album is already in play, in any type of production, post-production or whatever, in the infant stages, in the thinking stages. What do you think about this? What do you think about that, going with that? But when you already have a body of work, I don't think it's as easy for everyone else, third party, to get involved, because some of the things was, well, let's go through all the songs and we'll pick them together, which ones we're going to, and then the rest of them we'll just get rid of. Well, I'm not a firm believer in getting rid of anything, because I think somewhere down the line, things can be used.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And you talked about that too. Like, we don't let things go to waste. And maybe that's because of being still an indie in the trench band, a lot of that stuff is kind of like the lifeline of what we do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
you know, and because you never know what really is going to be a hit and what's not going to be a hit, you just don't get rid of everything.
Nope.
So, you know, and very seldom do indie artists come out with, you know, a whole side of deep cuts. They're so deep that they never made it on anything, or like if you listen to the Elvis station on Sirius XM, they have versions like take 2, take 3, take 4, take 5. Like your average studio, your average indie band, they don't have take 2, take 3, take 4. There was no nowadays. There's no saving of take 2, take. It's just copyright over. Okay,
that's right. Click, do it again.
Yeah,
click, do it again.
Even back in the days when we were doing reel-to-reel recordings, you could only go over so many times, or they have so much room, and then they go, look, we're going to have to, unless you're going to buy some more tape, we're just going to have to, we're just going to have to erase this. I don't know. Okay, I guess, we'll take it. Well, that's it. So you were kind of forced to what you have. So, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that on our level, like you had said, I mean, let's be honest, it's always cool to go, hey, I got this producer, and he did this, he did that on our level. But yeah, I don't necessarily think that it is always necessary for people at our level. You kind of know what you want your song to be, You know
how hard it is to get onto a chart these days? I mean, it's always been difficult. But I think it's even more difficult now, especially since metal, like, I don't even know if anybody looks at those charts. And they're usually occupied by bands that have already been around.
The only time I personally look at those charts is when somebody that I know posts, hey, we made the charts. Right. And then I go, oh, that's right. Yeah. There's charts. I forgot.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, and it's just a PR piece. But, I guess for some, it still does something for them.
Sure.
Again, for metal, it's so difficult. It's so hard.
Yeah.
For these,
and there's so, we talked about this on a previous show. There's so much stuff and bands and artists in metal. We're talking about metal. So there's so many bands out there, so much material, so getting on the charts is even getting close. Even just having the list just brushed by me would be okay.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you.
That thing's way in the distance.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely not part of my thinking in terms of when I'm writing or releasing. Like, oh, we're going to hit the charts, or how we get. I don't even think of that. It's not even a concern of mine.
No.
Again, like I said before, I've heard some albums, some EPs that had some producers attached to them, and I don't think that they were worth anything more than what they were pressed on. So you have to really weigh out everything and say, do we really need this? Or do we just need to spend a little bit more time writing better songs, arranging our songs a little better? Like, if we're not sounding like the bands we want to, or our favorite artists, or we're not hitting those emotional peaks, then what do I need to do that? I mean, okay, you can pay somebody to tell you that. Well, this is what you need to do. But again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. This is my personal feeling, is a lot of these bigger name producers, all they're doing is they're taking this band that brings them in and just say, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. And they rewrite their songs or write songs for them. And it's basically their music. And there's a lot of that. I didn't get into this to have somebody else tell me how to play. Because, like I said, to me, it's not authentic enough. Now, again, I haven't had that big check waved in front of my face, so maybe that I may do the whole different thing. I don't know. Like I said, I'd write an album for a record label if as long as I was paid for it. Because I'll go write another one. It doesn't make a difference. Payday isn't bad. I'm not saying it, but to put the money out and have no return or run the risk of it, I don't know. Especially as an indie artist, independent artist. Yeah, I don't know if that risk is worth it, because I could probably get so much more out of it later. I could get some things that would definitely, some better PR, some better attention that way. Again, put it into better recording, maybe a better mastering. Like, one of the things that I do is, for mastering, I work with better names, bigger names, people that have a track record in our kind of music. And I think that's very important. Now, I know a lot of programs, a lot of the, DAWs have mastering presets and stuff, and a lot of people use them, and they sound great. But if I'm bringing in that third party to give me that different perspective, and there's been some pluses there, though we haven't used these individuals as a producer per se. When I have sent the stuff to mastering and we've had conversations about it, or it's gone back and forth, they've given me producer type input, either to make some changes sonically so it works better on the meters and in the ears, so you get a better presentation, and or for the next time, like, hey, look, this is working, there's nothing wrong with it, everything sounds great, but consider this next. Like if you're thinking of going this route again, try it this way, such and such, and you're going to find that then you'll be able to have this, or you'll get this, or get that. To me, that's valuable. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever have gotten by a producer was keep turning the knobs till you like the sound. And you know what? That's about as authentic as you can get. He's basically saying there's no magic, there's no specific formula or combination that you would use for everybody. Just keep turning until you're happy. If you're happy, that's a plus. Right? Now, I mean, I guess the flip side of that is, even if you're happy and it sounds like crap, that's, again, you need to go back, and if you're having somebody just take your money and not tell you anything, well, that's not good. And unfortunately, and you know it, I know it, there's a lot of that goes on in this industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We talked about it in our PR stuff, and the advertising and the marketing, and and it happens as well with the recording and the mastering and everything that kind of, even in distribution sometimes. So, but that's where I'm at, man. I'm a firm believer. Just kind of produce it yourself, and you'd be surprised about how much you learn. And though you may not understand chord theory, chord progressions, harmonies, and all that kind of stuff, you'll learn that because you'll want to know, what does that mean? What's the definition of it? And how can that pertain to my music? What can it do or not do for my music? It's better to know it and not use it than to not know it and have no opportunity to use it.
Yeah.
Right? You want to be a warrior in a garden and not a gardener in a war. You got anything else you'd like to add?
Real quick, one thing why you say that, and I was thinking about it while you were saying it, I'm also a firm believer in taking those opportunities, right? We talked about in the previous episode of this season, just do it, right? Just say yes.
Right.
So if you produce stuff yourself, God knows what you'll learn, and who's to say you won't turn around and go, I kind of think I want to learn more about this producing gig, and end up, loving it and it being a career. Maybe you move out of the music side on the playing music side of it and writing, and you become a producer.
Oh, absolutely. Listen, we talked about this in a lot of episodes. Like, nowadays the artist wears so many hats.
Yeah.
Every kind. And a producer is just, to me, evolution to what you're doing now.
Right.
You're just taking a more dramatic role to it. You're taking that leadership role. There's some business side to it. Making sure everything's on time. You're running, it's like a director. It really is. It really is like a director of music. So there's a lot that can be there. But listen, I mean, why not? If you don't know, take the time. Google search it. You'll get some basic stuff, and then you start reading. Some of the greatest stuff that I learned, I just read interviews from other producers.
Yeah.
And if you listen to some interviews of artists who've worked with certain producers, and you can hear certain things that producer kept repeating in different, whatever the artist was. They had like a model or a template, or they had structure to what they did. And I'll tell you, that tells you a lot. That tells you,
or they're trying to get something across.
Right.
Like they're trying to just keep banging something into your head till you understand it.
Yeah,
that's why they keep saying it.
And they're trying to bring out the best. If their goal is in line with your goal in terms of making this music the greatest it can be, then they're constantly pulling at the reins to get you at your best. It's like, again, like a director trying to get those actors to perform the best they can. And if that means 100 takes, if that means making them angry, if that means, bringing in cheeseburgers, whatever the case may be, they're trying to get them to perform at their highest levels.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. If you like that, check out some of our other episodes at www.thecosmicvoice.com. Step into the Cosmic Verse and fill that void. Thanks so much for listening. This is the Cosmic Voice. Be sure to check us out at thecosmicvoice.com. Like and follow us on Facebook at The Cosmic Voice. You can find The Cosmic Voice everywhere you listen to online podcasts, like Deezer, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, and so many more.
Okay, folks, that will do it for another episode of The Cosmic Voice. Mick and I would like to say thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
You're listening to The Cosmic Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business.